Did you know that just over 100 years ago, Britain could have crushed the United States? And that one single, almost forgotten event changed everything, setting the stage for America's rise and Britain's slow decline. This isn't a story about World War I or II. This is about a financial crisis that became a secret power struggle. A high-stakes poker game played in the quiet rooms of banks and government offices. It all starts in 1907. Imagine a world where London is the undisputed king of finance. The British pound is the world's currency. If you wanted to trade anything, from cotton in Egypt to rubber in Brazil, you did it through London, using British banks and British pounds. The British Empire wasn't just a collection of territories on a map. It was a global financial web, and London was the spider at its center. Its power was absolute. Meanwhile, America was the Wild West of finance. It was a booming industrial giant, a teenager full of raw energy and potential, but it was also reckless. It had no central bank, no financial safety net. Each bank was an island, and the whole system was prone to panic. Think of it like a skyscraper built without a solid foundation. It looked impressive, but a strong gust of wind could bring the whole thing down. And in the autumn of 1907, that gust of wind arrived. The trigger was a failed gamble. A couple of ambitious speculators in New York tried to corner the market on United Copper Company stock. Their plan was to drive the price up, make a fortune, and be hailed as geniuses. But it backfired spectacularly. The stock crashed, and the banks that had lent them money started to wobble. Panic is contagious, and it spread like wildfire. People rushed to their banks, demanding their money. This is called a bank run. The problem is, banks don't just keep all your cash in a vault. They lend it out. So when everyone wants their money back at once, the bank can't pay and it collapses. And when one bank fails, people get scared about their own bank, even if it's healthy. More runs, more failures. The dominoes started to fall across New York, and then across the entire United States. The panic of 1907 was on. The American financial system was in free fall. Businesses couldn't get loans. Factories shut down. People lost their life savings overnight. The country was staring into a financial abyss. There was no Federal Reserve, no government institution to stop the bleeding. So, who could? In this moment of crisis, one man stepped into the void. J.P. Morgan. He wasn't a president or a king. He was a private banker. But his power was immense. Morgan gathered the country's top financiers in his grand library on Madison Avenue. For days, he locked them in, refusing to let them leave until they agreed to pool their money and prop up the failing banks. It was a dramatic, smoke-filled showdown. Morgan, old and imposing, literally held the fate of the American economy in his hands. And he succeeded. He strong-armed the financial community into saving itself. The immediate crisis was over. J.P. Morgan was hailed as a hero, the savior of Wall Street. America breathed a collective sigh of relief. But the story doesn't end there. In fact, this is where it gets really interesting. Across the Atlantic, the bankers in London watched this whole drama unfold with a mix of fascination and opportunity. Remember how London was the world's financial center? During the panic, America was desperate for gold, the ultimate form of money. The only place to get enough gold quickly was the Bank of England. So, shiploads of gold were sent from London to New York to help stabilize the situation. The Bank of England essentially bailed out America. On the surface, this looked like a classic case of the master helping the apprentice. Britain, the wise old empire, was saving its former colony from its own foolishness. But behind the scenes, a different conversation was happening. The British realized something crucial. This American panic, while chaotic, had shown the world two things. First, America's industrial economy was an absolute powerhouse, so large that its internal problems could shake the entire globe. Second, and more importantly, it showed that America was financially unstable and dependent on Britain. The British could have used this moment to tighten their grip. They could have imposed harsh terms, bought up American assets on the cheap, and locked America into a subordinate financial position for decades. They held all the cards. They could have crippled their rising rival, but they didn't. Why? Because some very smart people in London saw the future. They saw that another, bigger crisis was coming. A war A European war was looking more and more likely, and the British knew that if it came, it would be ruinously expensive. It would be a war fought not just with soldiers, but with money, and they knew they wouldn't have enough. So they made a calculated, long-term bet. Instead of crushing America, they decided they needed to build it up. They needed America to be a rich, stable, and reliable financial partner. A partner that could, one day, lend them the vast sums of money they would need to fight a global war. The British realized they needed to transform their greatest rival into their future financier. This led to a profound, but quiet, shift in policy. British leaders and bankers began to subtly encourage American financial reform. They saw the chaos of 1907 and thought, they need a central bank, just like we have. The panic had terrified Americans, too. The near collapse of their economy made them realize they could rely on one old banker in a library to save them every time. The call for a central banking system grew louder. This movement culminated in 1913 with the creation of the U.S. Federal Reserve. It was a controversial decision, born directly from the ashes of the 1907 panic. For the first time, America had a lender of last resort, a central institution capable of managing the money supply and preventing systemic collapse. It was the foundation of the modern American financial system. And just 1 year later, in 1914, the British foresight proved chillingly accurate. World War I erupted. The Great War was a financial black hole. Britain and its allies had to pour every ounce of their national wealth into the war effort. Their gold reserves dwindled. Their debts skyrocketed. And where did they turn for money? They turned to New York. They turned to the very financial system they had quietly helped stabilize. J.P. Morgan & Co. became the official purchasing agent and financier for the British and French governments. Wall Street, once the recipient of a British bailout, was now bankrolling the Allied war effort. The flow of money had reversed. Gold, which had once flowed from London to New York, was now flooding back across the Atlantic in the other direction to pay for American loans and goods. By the end of the war, the world had been turned upside down. Britain was victorious, but it was financially broken, deeply in debt to the United States. America, on the other hand, had gone from being the world's biggest debtor to its biggest creditor. The US dollar began its long journey to unseat the British pound as the world's primary currency. The center of global finance was no longer in London. It had crossed the Atlantic to New York. The panic of 1907 was the catalyst for this epic transfer of power. It was the moment Britain chose cooperation over confrontation, securing a short-term ally at the cost of its long-term supremacy. It was the crisis that forced America to finally grow up and build the financial institutions that would allow it to dominate the 20th century. It is a story that is often lost between the great wars and revolutions of the era. There were no big battles or famous treaties. It was a change that happened in balance sheets and bank vaults. But its impact was just as profound. It was the quiet, forgotten turning point when the torch of global power was passed from the old world to the new. So the next time you think about the rise of America, don't just think about military victories or industrial might. Remember the panic of 1907 and the silent decision made in London to save a rival in the hope of saving themselves. It is a fascinating lesson in how the real levers of power are often not pulled on the battlefield, but in the quiet world of international finance. Thanks so much for watching. If you found this story as fascinating as I did, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the history you thought you knew. See you in the next video.